Good afternoon, Salin sir, and thank you so very much for joining me this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Purvish. Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me.
Sir, it's our pleasure, sir. Sir, I have always seen you with scale in your hand when I used to practice. That's the impression that I have in my mind of Salin sir. So, can you I mean, how what is the reason of having that all day, and what you actually how do you prepare with that, and how do you keep that updated cases in your mind? What do you I mean, how do you what do you what notes you take, and how do you note that updates?
So you're right, Purvish. I used to be called the scale guy because I always usually used to have a volume of scale in my hand. But again, this was way back in the 90s, actually 97 when I started practice, and then probably up to 2003 because those were the days when I was literally briefless. I had a lot of time, I had a lot of time with me, and I had uh, developed this habit of reading case law. And actually, scale is supposed to be the fastest because they churn out these cases 3 or 4 days after delivery.
True.
So I had formed this habit of roaming around with scale. Whenever I used to get the time, I used to open it and read it in court. And then I used to keep a diary also. So especially the case law, whichever, I mean, anything of real importance actually would then ultimately go into my diary. Okay, a brief note. I would mention the case and then the ratio. And in those days, I mean, since I had a lot of time, I used to read the entire case because, I mean, nowadays it's not possible to read the facts. I used to read the facts and then try to understand what the Supreme Court is saying, the ratio, and then that one line would be in my diary. And whenever I had the time, I also used to mention briefly the facts. So that's the thing about scale actually, the yellow scale. You're right.
So I have seen you up to 2007-8 when I was there, and that's the time
Right,
the memory I'm having of you, sir. Sir,
right.
how was Salin sir when Salin sir was a child, and what do you carry along from your childhood till now?
Okay, so as a child, I can just remember two things actually. That one is that I was very very competitive. Uh, I always wanted to be first in class actually, though I was rarely a topper. Uh, and one thing, one bad thing about me was I was a bad loser. I mean, I could not really accept defeat, and that's why actually when you ask me that what have I brought from my childhood in this profession, I'll say it's the reverse. That when I came to this profession, I realized that I had to drop that bad habit because, I mean, I used to ask my father that how do you deal with the fact that you argue in court and then you lose? And he told me one day, I just remember this. He told me that look, our job is to do our best and then whistle. Okay, and I've remembered that all along, and I think after coming into this profession, I mean, day in and day out, we win some, we lose some actually, and but so that is something that I have on my own developed, and at least I've come to accept the fact that uh, we should all be able to accept defeat actually with equanimity. I mean, that's you can only do so much with the facts, right? So yeah, I mean, as a child, I was competitive, but I was also a bad loser.
So, was becoming a lawyer was always your passion?
uh, Yes, you can say that because so like I am the fourth generation lawyer. My great grandfather was a solicitor from England. My grandfather was a judge in the High Court of Gujarat. My father was a lawyer. So I won't say that I was really exposed to a lot of material when I was young, but I've always been around this. You know what I'm saying? I mean that. So I mean this thing about law, because my dad used to have his office at our residence.
Hmm.
So I mean I used to move around in these circles, and I used to sit. Sometimes I used to sit actually when my dad was dealing with clients and all that. So I think yes. I mean, I've never really thought about any other profession. I always wanted to be a lawyer, and I think more than lawyering, I always used to feel that judging. is, I think, the most challenging thing ever.
That is true.
Yeah, but yeah, I never became a judge, but
Right, sir. Sir, which college have you graduated your law from?
okay, so that's interesting. That so there was a literal seesaw. Uh, After my undergrad, I went to Elisha Law College the first year, and I was not really. I mean, I was not really happy. And then, so in the second year, I went to Siddharth Law College in Gandhinagar because there it was a new college actually, and the college was doing a lot of activities in those days. But then the third year, I came back. Wisdom prevailed. I came back to Elisha Law College because the commute killed me. I mean, in those days, Ahmedabad, Gandhinagar was like 30. Today, it's very easy. But in those days, 30, 40 kilometers was, I mean, a long drive.
Right.
So wisdom prevailed, and ultimately, in the third year, I came back to Elisha Law College. So it was like 1, 2, 3.
So were you attending courts while you were studying law, along with your studies?
Uh, I so I never attended court in the first year. Probably a bit in the second year. In the third year, I only used to attend in one session. It was either in the first session or in the second session. And the reason being that I was always so I was very close to my senior, Mr. Patel, because he was also a family friend, and he used to tell me that the as a law student, don't waste your time in court actually, because this is the only time that you will get to read material, read cases, read foreign treatises, Indian treatises. Because once you start appearing in court and once you start reading up on files, it's very difficult to find the time. So I followed that. I was like mostly at home or in college, reading up on books and all that. But yeah, I was not really appearing in. I was not really coming to court that often.
Sir, you went to US for your masters. So was it immediately after your graduation of law, or you practiced for a while and then you went for masters?
No, so I went immediately after my LLB because I didn't want to start practice and then go after a couple of years, which actually should have been should be done. I would have. I mean, if for students who are interested in these foreign programs, I would advise them that it's always better to practice for a couple of years, even 3 years and 4 years, and then pursue your LLM program. But I went immediately. Uh, as a result of which, I was in my class. I was called the baby because I was the youngest in my class. The average age of LLMs is usually about 27, 28, and I was only 23 when I went there. So, yeah, I mean, but I went immediately.
Right. Sir, have you ever not thought of joining your practice in US itself, and why it was you that you returned to India after your LLM?
So, Purvish, I did work after my master's. I was lucky to get a job in Queen Emmanuel, Urquhart and Oliver. It was a firm in Los Angeles. In those days, it was only of it was it was probably made up of 70 lawyers. Now, I think it's in the top 3 or the top 5 in the US. So I did work for a year, but I came back because I was mainly doing chamber work. It was not going to the court actually. And then one day I went up to my partner and I asked him that when will I get to go to the court? And he started laughing. He told me that Shalin, do you know when did I get to go to the court the first time? And I asked him by when. So he told me that it was in the 7th year, and that too I was sitting next to a lawyer. And so he told me that, look, you are not even a white American with an accent, so you can imagine how much time will you take. So I mean, it was just. I mean, it was said in jest, but still, in the US, I found that if you are working in a big law firm, you're just a cog in the wheel. So it's very difficult to go to the court and set up your own litigation practice. And I was always interested in litigation.
Right.
So I chose to came back after 1 year.
So, what do you advise students now who all are willing to go to foreign for pursuing their LLM? Because there are two theories. I have been interacting with some seniors for last about 10 days now, and there are two theories coming up. One theory from seniors which is coming up is it is not advisable to waste time and money in doing LLM in foreign countries. It is better you start practicing in the profession wherever they want to, and that would help them in better way than pursuing the LLM. And another theory is to get LLM done, to learn more about the subject and the world around, and then to start upon the practice. What is your advice on that?
See, Purvish, I think it's a very personal thing, but if you ask me, so many students have come to me and they've asked me the same question, this vexing question, and I've always told them that if you have the money, don't even think, just go to the US and do this program. Because I'll just say this, that the LLM program in the US is very, very intensive. Secondly, you are also competing with the top, I mean, I would say the best students in the world. I mean, they're coming from all countries actually. For example, in my law school, I think there were students from like probably about 60, 70 countries. And thirdly, the professors were amazing. The material that we studied, and obviously the method, the Socratic method, because I mean, in those days in 93, 94, actually, we never had this method in law school. Now they do have it in law school, especially O.P. Jindal and I think even GNLUs and all that. But the Socratic method in the US, I mean, where there is a discussion, literal discussion between the professor and the student. I mean, that is something that you don't get over here. And I still feel that US is really the place for scholarship. So I would never ever dissuade anyone if he's asking me that should I pursue an LLM program in the US. And let me say this frankly, I'm also heavily biased. I mean, biased in the sense that, yeah, I mean, I really benefited out of it. So I would never ever tell anyone actually not to go. You must go.
So, any changes that you suggest in the present legal education system?
Two things. One is that we can make these studies very interesting if we mix it up with case law and treatises. Because I mean, the way we studied, it was less like basically, we were reading a textbook on, say, partnership or company law, for example, Avtar Singh in contract law, company law, and all that. I mean, just V.N. Shukla in constitution law, T.K. Tope in constitution law, CY also. I read CY twice actually. But if you see the American case books, I mean, what they do is that they introduce students to cases. So you'll read the entire case, and then I mean, you'll ask questions that what did the Supreme Court do here? And then you'll tweak the facts a bit. The professor will say, okay, suppose this didn't happen, this happened actually. What would the court have held? Right. So I feel that a mix of cases, and then from the cases trying to understand what the Supreme Court, how the Supreme Court reasons, how the courts reason, how the courts arrive at the conclusion. That is probably a better way of learning law, and I think that also will make it interesting. So that is one thing that I think we should definitely introduce in our law schools. But Purvish, I'm told that a lot of law schools are now using that. Okay, so well, I mean, that's the way I think law should be learned. That's what I feel.
So, with whom have you started your practice with?
Okay, so I came back from the US in '97, and I started initially on my own. Then I joined the chambers of Mr. Mihir Joshi. I worked with him for a year. He was mainly, I mean, he mainly had corporate cases, and it's difficult when you only have corporate cases to part with matters where juniors can argue. I mean, he's a very fine human being. So I realized too early that I mean, this is not the place where I want to be, because if I really want to argue, so then I joined Mr. Girish Patel, and obviously Mr. Girish Patel, a lot of cases he was doing a lot of public interest litigations, and he had a lot of cases in labor laws and service laws. Right. So that is where appearances were easy for me. So and I joined Mr. Patel in 1999. Yeah. So I mean, and then I stayed with him for about 4 years. Yeah.
So what quality of Girish Bhai that you carry along with you even in your practice today?
Well, Purvish, I can't say that I carry his qualities, because I mean, he was too many things bundled in one. He was an activist, he was a jurist, he was a professor, he was a really passionate champion of the truth, and he used to fight really for the poor people. But I can just say this, that I remember his favorite lines, and I carry that even today. And so he used to tell us that if you're smart or rich or lucky, you will beat the laws of man, but the outer laws of nature and the inner laws of the spirit, no man can, no man can. And I mean, I can say that I remember this whenever, when there are times when, I mean, there are temptations and you can easily fall a prey to so many things.
Right.
But I remember these lines, and yes, definitely, I would want to live up to that.
True, sir. True. Sir, when have you thought to become independent, and how difficult was it for you to become independent?
I worked with Mr. Patel from 1999 through 2003. So I was 32 when I was in 2003, and then I started getting cases of my own, mainly service cases, and I was doing a lot of motor vehicles cases. So that is the time I felt that I think I should branch out and do something on my own. And obviously, Mr. Patel was very kind. Actually, he was, as I said, that he was like a father figure to me. So I asked him frankly, and he said that, yeah, I mean, Shalin, I think it's time to move out and do something on your own.
Yeah.
And that's how, I mean, it was a difficult choice, because I mean, you're too scared also, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you need clients.
Correct.
But then I took this step, the bold step, which everyone has to take at some time. Even you've done that. So, and well, yes, initially it was difficult because 2003 through 2007, there were few cases actually. So that's when you've seen me actually with the scale in my hand. I got a lot of time to read. But yeah, but Purvish, I think that this is something that every lawyer has to go through, isn't it? I mean, unless you have some, I don't think it's ever happened to a lawyer that, he got a legacy from his father, actually, from someone, actually, all these cases, right? Every lawyer has to go through this.
Right.
And I think it's necessary because, you understand what is hardship. So, well, I mean, I have also been through that period of brieflessness, but gradually cases came by and then I've never looked back.
Right. Salin sir, these days even law students who actually will be passing, they are more inclined to join corporate side or some law firms rather than to come into practice. And the bright students are being absorbed by corporate or the law firms, and they do not choose to come to litigation because of the fear that we have in the getting settled in the profession. What is your advice to them, if at all they are inclined to join the profession?
So yeah, that I would call it in the language of that it's really the prisoner's dilemma, isn't it? See, I mean, I don't even blame the students because a lot of students have spent a lot in these 5 years of law school because everyone is not well off, and therefore those bright students, especially when they graduate, these firms they do have a good starting pay. Unfortunately, when you enter litigation, litigation doesn't pay that much initially because I mean I've rarely come across people who have cases as soon as they graduate. So then so obviously you start with a lawyer, you start with either senior counsel, senior advocate, or you start with some junior lawyer or whatever. And I mean, they don't pay much, isn't it? Because it's just like that. Litigation, it's a practice, I would say. I'm told that some people believe, some seniors in Bombay believe that, well, it's a big thing to be associated with me, so I'm not supposed to pay actually. And I think that's just crossing the line. I don't agree to that. But I think the reason why bright students are not choosing litigation is this, that firms do pay a lot more.
Yes.
And that's really the sad part of it, I would say. Yes. But I'm sure that there are bright students who, after working for a couple of years or even 3-4 years, actually they feel that now this is the time to just leave the firm and do something on our own, because we have the gumption, we have the the courage and the ability to do it. And I think you'll find them in the profession as well. But I would not. Yeah, I mean, it's a tough choice, but I would not really blame those bright students.
Right, sir. Sir, when have you appeared independently before the court for the first time, and were you nervous when you appeared for the first time?
Oh, Purvish, a chill runs down my spine when I think of those days. When I think of that first day. So my first appearance was in a service matter in 1997. It was, I think, August 2nd, 1997, before Justice Keshot in Gujarat High Court actually, and he was,
Right.
so I'm sure you know him actually, and he was called the Fast and the Furious.
Right.
Okay, he was really fast.
True.
And I remember only this much, that I got up. I was like full of goosebumps actually. I got up, I argued the facts, and he had this habit of saying yes, 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 next, next. And I think I must have argued for about 7-8 minutes, and then ultimately at the end I just exhausted myself, and I looked up at him and he said that okay, good, dismissed. But so but I'll tell you this actually, that that day arguing the case was not as hard as walking out of the courtroom, a jam-packed courtroom with a dismissal. That was tough.
How have you overcome that situation, and what have you done to overcome your nervousness in the courts?
Yeah, I think Purvish, it's just a matter of experience. I think as I told you, everyone has to go through it. There are very few lawyers I see who are so confident that they have never felt this nervousness. I mean, I'm just jealous of them. I can only say that. But most of us have had this feeling.
Yes.
And if you ask me, frankly, it's just with repeated appearances in court and telling yourself that no, I can do it. Okay, stay focused. Okay, argue the facts. Try to answer questions. That's how, I think I was able to get rid of it. But Purvish, having said that, let me say that even today, in a contested case when I appear, I'm much better off, but I still get those goosebumps. Trust me.
Sir, any specific matter that you recollect which has transformed your attitude towards the legal profession?
Can't really say transform, but Purvish, I did a couple of matters where I was really proud. I was really proud of being in them. So one was the Lok Ayukt case. I'm sure you must know, it landed up in the Supreme Court actually, where so there was a fallout between the Chief Justice of the Gujarat High Court and the state government because they were not able to agree upon a name, Justice R.A. Mehta. Justice R.A. Mehta was obviously the person recommended by the Chief Justice. So I was a High Court. I'm still a High Court panelist actually, and I was asked to appear in the case. And the best part about the case was that in the morning when I was just walking in the corridor, I got a call from the private secretary of the Chief Justice, and he said that the chief wants to meet you. And I was like taken aback, and I was okay, fine. So I entered his chamber, and he made me sit down, and he said that, okay, Mr. Mehta, today I'm your client. And I want an advice from you that should we file an affidavit in this case or not? And I had gone through the pleadings of the case, and I told him that, look, I think in this case, we should file an affidavit and make our stand clear. What does the Chief Justice of the Gujarat High Court have to say as far as the appointment is concerned, as far as the recommendation is concerned?
Right.
And that advice ultimately was accepted, and we did file an affidavit. So which was really a big moment for me, because I was just like too honored. I mean, the Chief Justice of Gujarat High Court telling me that I'm your client and accepting my advice. So that was one case. A second interesting case I remember is there was a review petition that we were arguing before a bench headed by Justice Qureshi. And so we had won, and it was a case where my clients in an auction had purchased some lands. And then the state filed a review saying that, look, there is cartelization and the price is too low. And, my clients had paid, there was some foul play and all that.
Right.
And so there were two matters. And in one I was appearing, and the other matter, Mr. Chidambaram was appearing, the great Mr. P. Chidambaram. So the reason I remember that case is that just before the case started, we had this discussion, and Mr. Chidambaram was of the view that, Shalin, don't touch the merits of the case at all, okay? Because we don't want to say anything on the merits. We just argue on the review. And I told Mr. Chidambaram that, look, fine, it may be a good strategy, but I think that the bench is not going to allow that because the bench is going to ask you questions. And he said, no, don't worry about it. And then the case started. Mr. Chidambaram finished the arguments. He was asked something on the merits, but yeah, with this stuff, he was able to avoid it.
Right.
When my turn came, Justice Qureshi was hell-bent on getting an answer on the merits.
Right.
And I had to argue the merits. I think I did a reasonably good job.
Right.
Obviously, ultimately we lost, but still, I remember that case because I was right. I was right in telling Mr. Chidambaram that the bench is not going to allow you to go scot-free, and I was right in that.
Right.
So these, I mean, not just that. I mean, I did better than Mr. Chidambaram. Obviously, Mr. Chidambaram is Mr. Chidambaram. I'm nowhere near him. But I remember that because that I had this hunch that Justice Qureshi would ask me to argue.
Right, sir. Sir, Girish Bhai is always our idol, even my idol as well. But whom other than Girish Bhai you consider to be ideal or mentor in your profession career?
Well, Purvish, I have worked with very few lawyers. Because I rarely used to engage a senior counsel actually. So obviously, since I had Girish Bhai, I rarely used to appear with the senior counsel. But I have worked with a few counsels in the Supreme Court, and I can say that I mean I admire Dr. Rajiv Dhawan. He's one person.
Yes.
I would love to see him argue because he's just very, very scholarly in approach.
Very true.
And I think as far as constitutional law is concerned, I think he's undoubtedly the best, according to me, actually. Only thing is I'm scared of his temper. Okay, so that's something that I don't, I'm really scared of his temper. But a nice human being, and I would, yeah, I mean, if at all I have an idol, I would say that I would want to be something like Mr. Dhawan, as far as the arguments are concerned.
Right, sir. Sir, who are the people that you would attribute your success to? It could be your clients, seniors, juniors, other family members, anyone whom you like to.
Purvish, after my designation, I can say that it would be unfair to name people who have briefed me, but let me say that all the junior lawyers of the Gujarat High Court, and even have Bombay and Delhi for that matter, actually Bombay firms, I must be thankful to them because I think they have reposed great faith in me. A lot of juniors, I mean, literally in 2012 when I got designation, I was only 40, and I didn't have that many counsel briefs actually. But all these juniors actually, they were like they used to give me briefs to argue, and I just can't. I mean, I can't forget that. Clients, as far as clients are concerned, two clients would stand out. One is obviously I can't forget PWD Employees Union. I'm sure even you must have, because there are, all those cases have gone to the Supreme Court ultimately.
Yes.
So PWD Employees Union, we filed the first case in 1997, and it has been with me even today. So for last, I would say, I mean, 23 years actually, we've been fighting cases for the poor actually, especially the daily wages of Irrigation Department, Roads and Buildings Department, Forest Department. So that, I think we must have filed more than 1,000 cases for sure actually for all these benefits, and most of them we have won. So that is one client who's definitely helped me. Second client, which I can't forget, is Bharti Airtel. I started appearing for them from 2001, and it was a roller coaster ride because these guys were putting up mobile towers. You know, those were the days of mobile towers, and we used to get the notices from the corporations and from the panchayats. You know, pay this and pay that. And let me tell you, we challenged all those notices successfully till in 2013. The government realized that we are not going to win a single case unless we come out with the law. And they came out with a law amending the Panchayats Act, the Municipalities Act, and the Corporations Act by making a provision actually for taxing. So that, yeah, I mean, so two clients actually, Bharti Airtel, which has now become Indus. Obviously, Indus is handling all that tower business, and PWD Employees Union, they have definitely can't forget that.
Right. Sir, what do you expect from an advocate who briefs you in the matter?
Purvish, facts, and facts. Trust me, I always tell people who appear with me that look, it's not that the law will take care of itself, because I mean, you'll have cases, you'll do research, we'll cite cases, but if you ask me, the most important thing in a case is the facts.
Right.
And I always tell my juniors that don't make me miss out a single fact. Okay, give me all the facts. Don't worry. There can be irrelevant facts actually, but that's something that I'll figure out actually. But don't hide facts from me. Just give me all the facts. And that's what I would tell juniors.
Right. So, how do you prepare? What methodology you adopt to prepare matter after you are being briefed?
So Purvish, frankly, I don't really rely on briefing because so what I do is I ask the AOR to send me the brief. My habit is that I read every single page. Okay, because I am uh, there are a few seniors who just have the gift of the gab and who probably appear in the court actually without reading anything. But I am not one of those actually. I read every single page. I make it a point. I do my own research. I have SEC online, and usually what I do is so late in the night. Actually, I would just look for cases, and then if something relevant comes by, I WhatsApp it to my junior and tell him actually they get get a copy. And then what we do is that after I've gone through the entire case, if required, I have a conference early morning. Otherwise, I just waive it. I just send a text message to the AOR and saying that I'm waiving it. And trust me, by now, everyone knows me in the High Court, actually. They all know that, okay, they're just waiting for my text message. Are we going to have the conference or not? But most of the times I waive it. I don't have the conference.
Right. So, have you ever had instances where you thought that there was no merit in the brief, and how do you actually deal with such situation?
Oh, yes, many times, Purvish. What I do is that uh, it's difficult to give you a percentage, but a lot of cases that come to me, they don't land up in the court because I frankly tell the client that it's a waste of money and a waste of time to actually file it. Okay, I've seen 2-3 times where the client has not agreed with me and the client has gone to some other advocate and just coincidentally I'm sitting in the court and the case is being argued and the case is dismissed, sometimes with cause. So I usually make it a point to tell the client just forget it. Uh, there are cases where the client would insist that okay, Mr. Mehta, let's just try actually. And what I do is that I argue it out. Okay. And yeah, sometimes the bench is going to tell you. For example, it happened to me that I was appearing in the court of Justice Abhilasha Kumari, and the case law was overwhelmingly against me. I argued for about 5 minutes, and then she said that, have you seen these cases? And I said, yeah, I've seen these cases. So she asked me with a smile that, so Mr. Mehta, what do we do? I told her, dismiss it. And she just smiled. So, but it's not that I start the case, I start out arguing by telling the court that you dismiss it actually. But I would give out the facts, and then obviously I won't hide cases which are against me. I'll tell the court actually, frankly, that these are cases which I can use in my favor. These are cases which are against me. And then the court says that, well, you don't have a case, actually, fine. You have to face it.
Right. So, what are your hobbies and how do you pursue same along with your professional schedule?
So I love traveling. I make it a point. This is all pre-COVID. Let me say, I make it a point never to be here in vacations. Actually, usually the first day of the vacation, you'll see I'm flying out somewhere. I love traveling. I love to go to places. I love running. I run a lot, actually, twice or thrice a day. Actually, there is a playground actually close by. And I love reading books, Purvish. I'm indiscriminate when it comes to books, actually. I can read science, I can read religion, I can read philosophy, I love fiction, I love literature, I love reading. Right. That's how I spend my time.
How have you utilized your time during this lockdown period?
So running is out of the question because I can't step out. So what I'm doing is I'm walking 8 kilometers a day. Right. I'm reading lots of books, actually. So what I do is usually I go online and find out this year's Booker Prize winners, actually. And then, you'll have a long list and a short list of Booker Prize. So what I do is that I order all of them. And then I end up reading the winners, especially because this year there were 2 winners, actually, Margaret Atwood and Evaristo. Short list I try to finish, long list I rarely finish. Okay, those books are just lying, actually. So my wife often chides me that, you don't read 50% of the books, but yeah, that's that. How much can you read? But I'm utilizing my time reading and walking. That's right. That's what I do.
So, any message that you would like to give to the legal fraternity during this lockdown period to remain positive?
Purvish, I can only say that it's really unfortunate what is happening in the world, but COVID is a great leveler. Okay, because it's equal to everyone. Everyone is equal. I can, if people are complaining, if people are whining, I can only say that look at the people around you. Look at the people who are stuck on the roads. Look at the people who can't go back to their homes. Look at the people. Look at the migrant workers. Actually, what about them? I think we are very, very fortunate. We are very, very fortunate, and to be safe and sound, and we are at home. I would just tell everyone, actually, just do the things that you like. Don't whine. Don't complain. Read, walk, spend time with the family. That's it.
That's it. Sir, what changes do you expect to see in the legal profession after this lockdown period?
Uh, I do expect a lot of arguments through, especially, I mean, if not arguments, at least these meetings and conferences through video conferencing. Even if the lockdown continues for a long time, because I mean, I've read quite a bit actually. They say that there are countries which have these suppressed and lift cycles. Actually, I mean, if you're not able to find a vaccine,
Right.
then it's not that I mean, this COVID is going to just vanish, right? I mean, you'll have cases appearing and reappearing.
Right.
So if the courts can't function at full capacity, I see a lot of arguments through video conferencing, Zoom or whatever. I mean, and I think we should make use of that technology. I mean, I'm not averse to that actually, though I'm not a technology geek at all. Okay, I love books in my hand. I don't read anything online. But I mean, we'll have to adapt, because I mean, if you don't adapt to nature, you're stupid. That's it.
Right, sir. Sir, any advice to the junior advocates who are now coming up in the bar and they will be struggling now after this COVID lockdown to get them settled?
Uh, well, my advice is only that let's all be positive, and I mean, let's just think of it in these terms, that it's just something which is going to pass. Okay, and the time that we have now, I think we should all spend in reading and doing things that we like. And as far as juniors are concerned, I can only say that why waste time? Actually, even I would even go to the extent of saying that there are so many fine hearing matters and all that. Actually, this is a time to prepare for them. Right. There are a lot of contested cases where you really, when the court is on, you don't find the time actually to read, let's say, 1,000 pages. Actually, this is the time, and I think we should all utilize that and make good use of it.
Thank you very much, Saling sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Purvish. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.